it's not working. All right, hopefully you guys can see the screen.
Yes, I can see it. Yep.
Okay, excellent. We'll go ahead and get started. Good evening, everyone. My name is Emily Kish, and I am a project manager with the City of Chicago, Department of Planning and Development. I'm here today with my colleagues, Tim Jeffries and Ryan Slattery, as well as our consultants, Bill James and Gabby Gherkin from Camiros.
Emily?
Yep.
Do you want to just let me just say, I'll kick us off, I suppose, too. Just everyone on the line and the attendees, thank you for all coming tonight. We're here to discuss the 79th Street Corridor TIF District and a legislative action that's happening to it in the near future. I think that Emily, a DPD staffer here, will go through the relevant points in her presentation, but I mean, I think the idea here is just that a lot of great things happening on 79th Street, and that TIF, the Tax Increment Financing District, or TIF District in this area, certainly has a role to play in helping make sure that momentum continues. And so we just want to go through that this evening and talk about what is happening to the TIF and what are the next steps for it in the future. Also joined right now by Sean Flynn from the 17th Ward office. I think Alderman Moore will hop on at some point tonight and say a few words as well, but just wanted to, we'll do our presentation, we'll do questions at the end, but if people have questions as things are going on, I encourage you to use the Q&A function in Zoom, and we'll answer as many questions as we can on the fly, and whatever we don't get to, or if there's questions afterwards, we'll do some sort of moderated question and answer also through that same Q&A function. So I guess with that, we'll kick it off, and I'll turn it over to Emily.
Great. So our presentation this evening will first address the purpose for this amendment and why we're here. Next, we'll discuss what is a TIF, how it works, and how it's used. Then we'll walk through the 79th Street Corridor TIF amendment, which will include the goals and objectives, the boundary, allocated and future projects within the district, the proposed land use plan, and the updated budget. Finally, we'll review the next steps in this process and open the floor to questions. As Tim mentioned, if you have questions during the presentation, please click the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen and type your questions there. As he said, we'll answer as many questions as we can during the presentation, but if we don't get to it, we can certainly answer it at the end. So why are we here this evening? To discuss the proposed extension of the existing 79th Street Corridor TIF District for an additional 12 years. The overall goal of this is to ensure that the TIF district will be on an ongoing financial resource for projects that will continue the positive momentum that has been happening on 79th Street. As part of this extension process, we will amend the termination date, revise the budget, update the land use plan, and make minor changes to the plan language prior to receiving council approval. Here we have a boundary of map of the 79th Street Corridor TIF district, which generally runs along 75th Street between Damon and Racine Avenues, along Racine Avenue between 75th and 79th Streets, and along 79th Street between Honore and Wallace Streets. These are the existing district boundaries and will remain the same with the amendment. The 79th Street Corridor TIF District was designated on July 8th, 1998, and absent this extension would be set to expire on December 31st of this year. In May of 2021, the city received state authority to extend the life of the 79th Street Corridor TIF District for an additional 12 years to allow for the continued redevelopment of the 79th Street Corridor project area. So what is a TIF district? TIF, or tax increment financing, is a funding tool that helps generate financial resources to support public and private development projects within a specific geography. The city of Chicago has had TIF since 1984, when the state of Illinois passed the TIF Act. The TIF Act allows individual municipalities in Illinois to designate TIF districts. The initial legislation has been amended many times, but it still provides the legal framework for the city to use TIF and allows the city to establish TIF districts in areas of the city that meet specific eligibility requirements. These areas need to demonstrate what the TIF Act calls blighting factors, which are defined in section 11-74.4-3A1 of the TIF Act. Per the TIF Act, the city is required to designate a specific area as a TIF district. When an area is designated a TIF district, the property taxes of all properties in the district are frozen to establish the base property tax. Any increase in property taxes after the designation is called incremental property tax or increment. These increment funds are set aside for the TIF district for the life of the TIF instead of being dispersed to the taxing bodies. When the TIF expires, property tax disbursement resumes as normal to the taxing bodies. For example, this year your property taxes are $100. Later this year, your property is designated in a TIF district, at which point, for the purposes of the TIF, the property taxes are frozen. Next year, your property taxes are $105. $100 of that bill, or the base property tax, which was the amount of your property taxes when they were frozen for the TIF, will go to the same place they always do, the city, schools, and park district. The remaining $5, or incremental property tax, will be allocated to the TIF district to be used for eligible projects. To be clear, the inclusion of a property within a TIF district does not increase property taxes. TIF districts do not directly change either the value of a property or the tax rate. Any given property has the same tax bill, whether it is inside or outside of a TIF district. A common understanding of TIF is that it is predominantly used to finance private development projects. However, you might be surprised to find out that's actually not the case. In fact, over 80% of all TIF funds over the past decade plus have been spent on fully public uses, including street improvements, CTA facilities, schools, and parks. The remaining 20% of funds are used to leverage private investment, including commercial, industrial, and affordable housing projects. The goals for 79th Street District remain the same and include concentrating commercial development at main intersections, redeveloping select buildings and vacant lots with non-retail uses, promoting commercial uses on Ashland and a mix of uses on Halsted and Racine, and enhancing educational facilities, street infrastructure, and public open spaces. As the designated Invest Southwest corridor, the momentum of 79th Street redevelopment will be strengthened by the extension of this district, which will ensure that TIF continues to provide financial support to future projects. In order to advance these goals, the city has approved TIF funding for the following projects in the district. The Auburn Gresham Healthy Lifestyle Hub, located at 845 West 79th Street, is a $16 million project that will redevelop a 4-story building into approximately 51,000 square feet as a multi-tenant office space, offering health and wellness services, community development services, and workforce development, with tenants that include UI Health and Broadway Pharmacy. The Auburn Park Metro Station, that just broke ground yesterday, is a roughly $28 million project that will create a fully accessible commuter rail station along Metro's existing Rock Island line. The city used TIF to help assist with site acquisition and environmental review. Lastly, approximately $2 million in TIF funds have been allocated for various public improvement projects, including street infrastructure projects and CPS playgrounds. Future projects include the Auburn Gresham Apartments, which is a $43 million Invest Southwest redevelopment project that has been allocated $15 million in TIF assistance. Located at 834 and 757 West 79th Street, the project will provide 58 low and moderate income housing units and ground floor retail. Additionally, we anticipate that future TIF-funded projects in the area will include continued economic development in conjunction with Mayor Lightfoot's Invest Southwest initiative, which has prioritized redevelopment along 79th Street, and the ongoing Small Business Improvement Program, which is financed with TIF dollars and will be accepting applications for funding this August 1st through 31st. Additionally, we anticipate equitable transit-oriented development associated with the future Metro station and additional public infrastructure maintenance and improvement projects. Also, as part of the of this amendment, DPD is updating the general land use plan for the TIF district, which reflects current zoning. The northern section of the 79th Street Corridor TIF District largely comprises industrial and commercial mixed-use development with some residential, while the southern portion of the district comprises mostly commercial development with pockets of residential, institutional, and public uses, such as schools. Finally, the amended budget reflects how additional increment that will be generated during the 12-year extension of the TIF district should be allocated. Please know that the line item dollar figures for each category are for planning purposes. The only amount that can't change without City Council approval is the total redevelopment project cost line item. Following this public meeting will be our Community Development Commission, CDC, introduction in July, and our presentation to the Joint Review Board in August. The next opportunities for public comment will be the Community Development Commission public hearing in September and at Finance Committee in November. We will introduce the TIF amendment to City Council in October and plan to receive Council's approval following Finance Committee in November. With that, I want to thank you all for your time, and we'll take any questions regarding this process.
Your thing is, Tim mentioned, if you guys want to use the Q&A, we can go ahead and get those questions and
right.
answer
So
them.
just to be clear, everybody's muted for this. So if you guys could please type your questions into the Q&A box.
Okay, I think we got one question. Are there 3 projects set or can they change? So Tim, do you want to answer? Do you want me to answer it?
Sure, I can answer. I'm pretty sure this is referring to the future projects.
Right.
And the answer is yes, they can change. These are just, for the future projects, these are really just examples of things that we think could happen around the radar. This is not limiting in any way. Other things can and hopefully will come down the pipeline and lead to further projects on 79th Street as we, as we said at the beginning, continue to hopefully see the momentum gather further and further steam. Yeah, I think that should.
Okay, so the next question was for religious organizations. Can they participate?
Religious organizations can participate for uses that are generally available to the public. I think that uses that are overtly religious or are not eligible for funds generally, but if they, to the extent that they have a sort of an open space that is generally accessible to the public at large, you could think about like some churches might have a consignment store attached to the facility, or like a coffee shop or something like that. Those would be addressed.
Okay. The next one was asking if we can get a printout of the information presented for the, I'm assuming the PowerPoint presentation.
Yes, I'll type out an email address that you can email, and we can get it to you. This presentation will also be on the department's YouTube page tomorrow morning.
So the next one is, how does the project affect single-family homes on 74th Place?
I think the general answer is it doesn't too much. I mean, this won't, as Emily said in her presentation, the single-family home. Are those, if they're the? Oh. Okay, I see.
Yeah.
There's not too many uses. The city doesn't have too many programs that intersect with single-family homes. There's a couple for sort of like the roof and porch repair, and if they're picked up in this district, they could be eligible. But generally, I think this is more about this TIF district is predominantly focused on the commercial uses. So I think that hopefully you would get to enjoy the amenities in your general neighborhood on 79th, on Racine, and on a Halsted. But I think for you personally in your home, it's not going to make much of an impact on your day-to-day life, either in your tax bill or how you can access the funds.
The next question, so would this require buildings to be evacuated or torn down?
No, I mean, not as a specific actions. I think, buildings could, if there was part of a larger redevelopment plan or a larger project, potentially buildings could be demolished, but I don't think there's nothing in this action, or because of the TIF, some building must be demolished or evacuated. That's really not the intent.
So then Patrick was bringing up the neighborhood improvement funds. So yes, there is a neighborhood improvement funds. It's geared towards more of the housing TIF districts. So since commercial is more, 79th Street corridor is more commercial, it wouldn't have, doesn't necessarily have NIP in it, but it could be in the future looked at potentially. So the next question, will the project help with funding to fix commercial rental property?
Go ahead, Emily.
I was just going to mention that SPIF might be an option for some of the smaller commercial properties in the area. And as I mentioned in the presentation, the applications for that will be August 1st through the 31st. So that might be an option. There's a pretty detailed website on the city's website that you can visit to get more information about Small Business Improvement Fund, which is SPIF.
Just a few more words on SPIF. It's a great program. Been around for about 20 years. Lots and lots and lots of success. Business owners and property owners can get up to $150,000 just to make, or include up to $150,000 and 75% of the total project cost of a renovation, whichever is lower, and to make building improvements to make it more, rentable for tenants if you're trying to attract tenants, or just better for a business that might already be occupying the space.
Yeah, so being a renter doesn't prohibit you from being in the program. So just because you're renting the property, doesn't mean you can still receive the SPIF funding for it.
And I will also find the website for that Emily mentioned and put it in the chat right now.
Sorry, just
no worries. I'll find
it. There was also another question which was asked: what is the max percentage of TIF contribution to the total cost of a project? Tim, I don't know if you want to answer that generally.
Generally, I think that it really matters on a case-by-case basis. All TIF projects are subject to a financial underwriting, meaning that we provide as much as the project needs. And so, it really depends on the specific project, but I think generally the sweet spot for TIF projects is in about the 30% range for some of our larger projects.
The next question is, we have a medical facility on 79th and Ashland serving the community since 1994. Is there any help to improve that facility?
I think in addition to some of the SPIF would be a great option if it's a smaller project. If it's a larger project, I can find let me find the website. I'll find the link for it. There's our just general TIF program that's larger, depending if you're looking for more than 150, let's just say about $250,000. If you're looking for more than that $250,000 mark, funds can be available. We'll have to review the project, make sure it fits within the parameters of all the programs and things like that. But if it's generally eligible, something like that. So.
The next one is, there's a local Family Dollar on 74th. That is one of few stores left. Will that store be affected? Will they have to shut down or move?
No, not as a result of this action. Right? This shouldn't impact them at all. In fact, they would theoretically be eligible to make improvements using the TIF funds with programs like the ones we've mentioned, SPIF and things like that.
So I think we got the answers that have been asked so far. I don't know if anyone else has any questions.
I have a question. So I understand the property taxes are being frozen, and it's the add-on, that's being used for the TIF fund. You mentioned, typically those funds go towards schools and different other things. In the case of schools, what happens with the schools in the area? Now, we're obviously, you guys are aware of the situation. We're talking about schools ideally that could use more funding, better books, better utilities, and also, just upkeep of the facility in general. Is there an allotment, or, I see the slide here, and I guess this is, so the slide talks to how it's typically being used, or is this how it's currently being used? Correct me if I'm wrong there.
This is reflective of recent, so 2011 to now, I believe.
Yep, Q1 this year.
Yeah, to how funds have been allocated. Just to be clear, TIF funds are used for capital projects, so they couldn't go to supplies necessarily, but they can go to physical improvements to structures, facilities, CPS related. I'll let Tim and Ryan sort of speak to how CPS engages us with TIF requests.
And that's fine. I guess that's fine. Thank you for clarifying. And I guess my just, following up, capping off my question, are there future plans, I guess, maybe you can discuss for now, maybe not, for what we can expect for the area schools in terms of like building up like the infrastructure or improving, things of that nature within the building itself or outside of the building?
I think that would be something. So we can use funds for these schools to the extent that the schools are in the district. I believe you've got at least one school in this district.
And I believe recent improvements include playground improvements that were done. Outside of that, I'm not sure what other improvements are planned for CPS.
And Sean, I think that's just something that, to the extent that we've got further improvements that are needed in the schools in this district, I think that's just something that we would, absolutely look to you and the community to identify some of those needs in conjunction with CPS and, just what's the need in the area. And I think that there's a lot of different ways to pay for building improvements for schools. And it's just a matter of like, is TIF the best one? Oftentimes the answer is yes. And so, you saw on Emily's slide, we do fund schools at a pretty good clip. That figure has only gotten, frankly, much higher under Mayor Lightfoot. And so it's just, we'd look to you to you guys know the schools best and the needs best, and just identifying what those needs are with CPS and with DPD, and we'll work to fund them the best way we can.
Awesome, thank you.
Another question we have is, with this area being a more high crime area, how will security and protection for these plans come into play?
I think that, the TIF can be used for permanent improvements, and these are typically what we call capital improvements, or things like, it's like a building or a road or something like that. You have to have like a construction crew out there doing it. And so sometimes, some of the security doesn't fit that. It becomes things like, cameras, which are equipment, and that's not a permanent building improvement, or staff, to just get people, whether it's, more police officers on the street or private security or whatever that is. And that stuff unfortunately can't be paid for with TIF, but there is things that TIF can do, whether there's lights out and the area would benefit by just having a little bit more light, or if a building as part of a SPIF project wanted to do, better doors, or some roll down things at night, whatever the specific needs. I don't want to assume that I know what this area does or doesn't specifically need, but things that fall within that sort of capital permanent building or public way improvements, those are all eligible. And you know, I think that some of this stuff too, it's you know, having an active bustling corridor is a great way to have more people there, more activity, more eyes on the street, as sort of the urban planning phrase goes, and hopefully some of the projects that are happening, you know, with the Auburn Gresham Apartments and the Healthy Hub, and you know, just down the street the new metro station that's starting work. Like hopefully that's the start of all that, in addition to the other things I mentioned.
So another question, can the city provide parking lots for merchants and shoppers? The meters are very pricey, or are pricey.
Unfortunately, no. You know, as Emily said during our presentation, ultimately the law is set at a state level about what can and cannot be used or is TIF eligible. And one of the few things that they say, like, no, it's not, you can't use it as parking. And so unfortunately, parking is not an eligible cost, but there's ways that doesn't mean that we can't do a project without parking. You know, I think the Healthy Hub over there at 79th and Green does have some parking spaces associated with it. So it comes into play in different ways and different parts of the budget. But as a standalone sort of parking lot that the city could come in and provide, you know, unfortunately, we can't do that.
The other question came up was, is there a recording for the viewing? And so yes, the DPD YouTube page, this recording of the presentation and the Q&A will be up there tomorrow at some point. So yes, it was recorded. Looking to see if there's any other questions. Doesn't appear like there's any open questions.
There's another one. How long does it take to get funding? I think this, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, from the time of an application to the time that we, you know, there is a process, and it has to go through legislative approvals, including city council, and sort of the day one you've submitted an application to, you know, you've actually got approval. It can vary depending on the size. For SPIF, it's quite fast. It might be a matter of, you know, quite fast in terms of the city. It might be a couple months. For a larger TIF redevelopment agreement, which, you know, could be anywhere from $500,000 to you know, multi-million dollars, that probably is closer to about a year. It's definitely can be a slower process. If things are really, really moving quickly, it might be 8 to 10 months, but it's more typically in the year range.
And to be clear, TIF funds are not issued upfront. They are issued after construction completion. So it's not an upfront check that someone receives and then they can go and construct their project.
And just for clarity, obviously, because we're talking about this TIF along the 79th Street corridor, this money is not going to be allocated or used for some area that is not the 79th Street corridor or any of the designated TIF areas around that. So in other words, this money isn't going to be used for something in Lincoln Park or anything like that, correct?
No, it's legally, these are geographically restricted by state law. So you can only use the TIF district in the district that generates the money. There's some allowance reporting, which means that you can take money and push it in between two districts that are immediately adjacent, which, you know, in this case might be the 79th and Vincennes TIF district, but that's sort of an across the block thing, not an across the city thing. And frankly, porting doesn't happen all that often. It does happen, but it's not something that is typically done, and it's usually done in it's discussed when funds are being approved and things like that. So it's something that everybody knows about when it's happening.
So last round, they changed the funding procedure. They indicated that you will fund as each part of project is done.
You might be referring to the Neighborhood Opportunity Fund program, or the SPIF. The SPIF program does also pay out in phases. You might have a project that's you know, $300,000, and they say, okay, the first phase is when you have $100,000, and the second phase is when you have another 100,000, and the third one, you know, so on. And they can break out, but you still have to do the work, and then you get reimbursed. They just shorten up the reimbursement period from the very end to the sort of going through the construction period.
Yeah.
And then where is the metro station? I believe you have the map for it. Yeah.
Maybe it's
I
better.
think it's just over there at 79th and Wallace. Sean, you can confirm that.
79th and Low.
Oh, okay, there you go.
Yep.
So just at the far east end of the district.
Right here.
Yeah.
If you can see
So
that.
as far as possible. Okay. So for a follow-up question from they changed the funding procedures, asking, is that still valid? So is still valid the way that the way NOF does their rollout?
So those other two funding sources, Small Business Improvement Fund and the Neighborhood Opportunity Fund, as I mentioned, can be funded incrementally throughout the project. TIF is the only structure that cannot be funded throughout the project. It's issued at the end of completion. Sure thing.
That's an look and see if there's anyone else that had any questions. And then to reiterate what Emily said previously during the presentation, there's two public speaking places that will occur at the public hearing and finance committee. So this is just the first of other times when we will be presenting this to different bodies to review and get public comment. So sorry, Lamont had a question. Am I understanding this correctly? Looks like if I need funding for my commercial property, I pay out the pocket first.
Yes, I mean, you will, the NOF program offers a little bit more leniency than the TIF program, but you would do the work and then you get paid back, and depending on the project and the program, you might get paid back, you know, within 30 days, or you might get paid back at the very end. You finished everything and you get a lump sum reimbursement. Really depends on the program. It depends on how much you're asking for and just the particulars of the project.
And to be clear, none of these programs fund any project at 100%. You will always have to provide a percentage of your project costs, some more than others, depending on the funding source.
Looking at both chats, and I'm not seeing any other questions. If anyone has anything else, we're happy to answer.
This is being recorded. We will, if you would like a PDF of it, I believe Tim has provided an email address to get that. And we'll see if we can also post it online. All of the funding sources that we've mentioned this evening have websites on the city's website. So SPIF, again, is the Small Business Improvement Fund. NOF is the Neighborhood Opportunity Fund, and TIF is Tax Increment Financing. And all of the applications are available online.
Okay, I got one more question, or another question. How about if most part of the project is done, can TIF fund the rest?
Unfortunately, we can't. It's the work needs to be done with the project has to be reviewed sort of in advance, because especially for the larger projects, you know, there's certain requirements that the city has, and those requirements are basically impossible to review and to ensure that they're being followed. if the work's already been done before the engagement with the city. And so this is a question that we get a lot, and it's not ideal for anyone, I think, because we get great projects that it's too late. But it's just a tricky thing for us, but it is the unfortunate answer.
Not seeing any other questions out here. I think everything's been answered. If you have any more.
I don't see anything. So again, as Ryan mentioned, on the screen now, you'll see our timeline for future meetings. So September, CDC public hearing, and then again in November, the Finance Committee. So if you want to attend either of those meetings will be announced on City Clerk's website, I think. Is that correct?
For Finance Committee, yeah, it's on the City Clerk's site.
Okay.
Yep.
All right. Well, I guess that's it for now. But please, if there's any questions or concerns or comments, we're happy to take any of those, and certainly hear from you at any of these upcoming meetings. We think this is a great opportunity to really keep the good things that are happening on 79th Street. Keep them going, and this TIF can be a great tool for that. We hope you found this useful, informative, and we look forward to seeing you at the groundbreakings for all these projects.
Thank you all for your time.
Thank you, everybody. On behalf of Alderman Moore and the 17th Ward, we appreciate you. Thank you.
Have a nice evening.
Bye-bye.
Take care.